So, Dr. Ryan Gray is very active on our website. He also runs Med School HQ. Is in the Air Force as a doc. Was a bit of a non-traditional student himself, and runs a very nice podcast. I like sending in people who are worthwhile to interview, and we're getting some more here. So, Dr. Ryan Gray, please.
Thank you, Rich. It's funny. I didn't know when I came. When I signed up for this, I'd be following the guy that started SDN. He started SDN because there was no information back in the day when the internet was in its infancy. I started medical school headquarters because of SDN to better paint a picture of what medical school's like. As Dr. Burnett had mentioned, SDN's kind of morphed into this. The pre-med forms have morphed into this kind of beast of its own. So. So if you go on SDN or are dissuaded of medicine, come over to my site and listen to my podcast, and we'll get you back chipper. But before, I'm going to talk a little bit about my path into medicine. I'm a pseudo non-trad, which I'll get into. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about you guys, because I think it's awesome what you guys have here. The community here, since day one when I stumbled upon OldPreMeds, I was very impressed with the level of knowledge that everybody was sharing and the collaboration that's out there. Rich has done an amazing job, so thank you, Rich. And for you guys must be scared out of your minds, because there's so much out there that's pushing you away from medicine. The cost that Dr. Burnett so lovingly showed how expensive it is. You have physicians that are actively telling you, no, do not go into medicine. You have so many reasons not to go into medicine, yet you're sitting here. And I thank you for that, because as you saw earlier, there's going to be a shortage, and that's more work for me, and I don't want more work. So the more people out there that are out there serving patients, helping patients, I think is better for everybody. So thank you. It's obviously not easy. There's so much information out there. It's hard to swim through it all, but you're doing it. So one of the things that I want to talk about today is my path to becoming a physician. As I said, I'm a pseudo non-trad, and one of the questions the admissions committee members talked about, that the biggest question that everybody wants to get to is why you want to be a doctor. And my path started back when I was about a half an hour old. I'm in the incubator, and I just knew the care that I got then. It was transformative, and I was able to write about it in my personal statements, and yeah, I don't know where I came across this picture. That is me, but I grew up in Southern California. I played baseball. I was the typical all-American kid. I had the baseball glove, the baseball. I wanted to be a professional baseball player, and never really was involved in medicine. My father was a type 1 diabetic, so I was kind of around a sick person growing up. He had kidney transplant when I was around 11, so I was kind of aware of the hospital, but I was still a little too young to fully understand what was going on. But this is what I wanted to do with my life. I grew up in Southern California. I wanted to go to Arizona State University, play baseball for them, and go be somebody in the major leagues. Of course, the statistics, as Dr. Burnett likes to show that it's a very small percentage of us get there. And that's what happened to me. I ended up hurting my shoulder playing baseball. I was pitching summer league, and went and sat in the orthopod's office with a bum shoulder. Now you're thinking, okay, this is where Ryan decided he wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. But this is not my X-ray, unfortunately. I could point out it's a little better on this screen. This is just a generic X-ray. The humerus on my x-ray was sitting about maybe a quarter inch, half an inch lower. I had stretched all my ligaments out, and every time I threw, the humerus was jumping up and giving me bad bursitis. So that's my story. But I was sitting in the orthopod's office as a 16 or 17-year-old, and I was frustrated with the orthopod. I sat there for half an hour, 45 minutes by myself. I think my stepdad or my mom was in the room with me at the time. He comes barging in through the door and throws my shoulder around a couple times and says, okay, you got two options, surgery or physical therapy. And I think the option he gave me was if I'm really serious about being a professional baseball player, which I think at that point I realized it wasn't going to happen. Although I have been in a movie as a Red Sox player pitching at Fenway, so I kind of lived it, but that's a different story.
Where's that clip?
I should have. I should have. Fever pitch about 52 minutes in or something. So, yeah. Anyway. I'll post it on the website. That's copyright infringement. Never mind. So, that was my experience. I went to the orthopod's office. I didn't like what he had to offer me, so I went to physical therapy. And that's when I said, oh, this is awesome. I get to hang out with athletes, make them better, and let them be professional athletes, since I wasn't going to be that person. And so I wanted to be a physical therapist. And, backwards. And at that point in time, I was in Florida. They have a cool scholarship program through the lottery that pays for school. But part of that is you have to have volunteering hours. So I went and volunteered at a physical therapy office. And I liked it. It was interesting. It was patient interaction. It was helping them get better, kind of that whole feel-good kumbaya story. But there was just something missing. And I sat down, talked to the physical therapist for a while, and she was realizing that I really wasn't into it. And she said to me, she said, if you're smart enough to get into PT school, you might as well be a doctor. And it was very strange to me, but then I realized she explained it a little bit further. This is back in the late 90s, where the demand for physical therapists was really high. The pay was going up. Everybody wanted to be a physical therapist, so it was really hard to get into school. And I said, okay, maybe I want to be a doctor. So it was kind of weird. Somebody else was telling me I should be a doctor. But it wasn't my parents, so it was okay to listen to them. and so that was kind of my first little aha moment. But my light wasn't that bright yet. It wasn't until my senior year of high school and my first patient that I kind of had that true aha moment of, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And my first patient, I apologize in advance for any cat lovers out there, but there's a popular Snickers commercial, an older one, where the quarterback gets hit in the head and gets all confused, and the sports therapist, their team doctor, runs out and says, do you know who you are? And he goes, yes, I'm Batman. Well, in my anatomy class in senior year of high school, I was Catman. And we had a cat that we dissected in senior year of anatomy class, and we named my cat Mr. Bigglesworth. So this is Mr. Bigglesworth from Austin Powers. Came out right around then. And this cat is what showed me that I loved anatomy. I loved cutting into things. And if somebody asked me why I wanted to be a doctor, it's because I wanted to cut you open. It's very strange to hear, but I loved surgery. It was a cat, but I spent my early mornings in the lab on the cat. I spent late afternoons on the lab with my cat. Any extra time I could spend with the cat, I did. And there was just something about it that I loved visualizing the anatomy inside. I loved feeling things and poking and prodding, and it was awesome. I loved it. And some of you may have that experience in the future, and I hope you do, where you go, that aha moment, okay, this is truly it. But the one story that always gets told with my cat is that I was the weirdo that brought in power tools from home. I know, I sound like Dexter. But, yeah, so I went to, in the class, there was the freshman biology student sitting there, and I'm the senior in the back with my Dremel tool, opening up the skull to play with the brain. And so I knew from an early age that from that point in time, this is what I want to do. I want to do surgery. And more specifically, because of my sports background, obviously orthopedics was my goal. So moving forward, I had everything laid out in front of me. Straight, nice, easy path, right? But then you get to, where do you want to do undergrad? And some of you might be in this situation now where, okay, I want to go to medical school, so I need to be pre-med, I need to figure out where to take my classes, but there's so many decisions, right? Who has the best quote-unquote pre-med program? Who has the best statistics of their pre-med students getting into medical school? What medical schools are they getting into? Who writes the best letters? Who has the least rigorous pre-med program? There's so many decisions, but none of them are important. The only important decision is, where are you going to be happy? All right? Where are you going to thrive the best? And for me, this is where I thrive the best. I lived in Florida at the time. I spent several Saturdays at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium with my family. They had gone to the University of Florida. And so the University of Florida was where I knew that I needed to be because of their athletic program, not because of their academic program. Yeah. So my decision-making probably could have been improved by browsing SDN back in the day, but I didn't care. And what I hope to show you guys is that no matter where your path takes you, if the goal is the same at the end, you'll get there. And so I got to the University of Florida. It's the only undergrad place I applied to. It was a quick electronic application from my school, and I got my acceptance letter. But unfortunately, it kind of went downhill from there. Big state school, pre-med advising wasn't the best. I was a number, not a name. My pre-med advisor didn't know me very well. And one of my first experiences with the pre-med advisor was not the most positive. And so I was very down. I didn't know what to do. And I don't know why she said this. Why she said, oh, you're white. You're a white male. You can't get into med school. Don't even bother. Because if you look at the statistics, 46% of white males that apply get into med school, which is higher than the average, right? You saw earlier. So this is 2012. I'm sure it was higher back in 2001 when I applied.
What year? You applied 2001?
2001.
It's still low applicant. That's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's like
It's
50%.
very bizarre, yeah. So you have to take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Trust but verify, as some famous person once said. And it was hard, and I tried to figure out why she would tell me this. And I only have one good reason in my mind why she told me this. Because she knew that I was going to be a fantastic doctor. That she knew that my patients were going to love me. And she didn't want that to happen.
You might overthought this.
No, I didn't overthink it. No, it's not. Oh well. Luckily, I was an exercise physiology major because I didn't want to do the hard sciences because it wasn't my game. But exercise physiology had most of the prereqs that I needed. I didn't have to do much beyond that. So there was a great core group of exercise physiology major classmates that I had that were also pre-med. And we were I think, the unusual group because we all hung out together, we all shared information together, we all helped each other, motivated each other, and kicked each other in the butt when we truly needed it. And I used them for support. And there were a lot of things that I led them, and they led me. And then there were some areas where I didn't really listen. And the MCAT was one of them. I said, oh, the MCAT's whatever. It's another test. I'm doing great in my undergrad. I have great GPA. The MCAT, I'll do fine. As I hope most of you know, the MCAT is like no other test you're ever going to take. Unfortunately, it's one of those necessary evils in the pre-med path, and you'll survive it, but respect it. That's the best word I can say. Respect the MCAT. I didn't respect the MCAT. I said, I'm going out to party. I made fun of the people, my friends, that were staying home studying. This is how, oh, you don't need to do that. And I think in the end it bit me. And I got my rejection letters in the mail as I applied during the quote-unquote normal time frame, the traditional time frame. And it was kind of a blow. I said, this is what I came to undergrad to do. It was the only thing that I wanted to do. I didn't have a plan B. I didn't want a plan B. And when I talk to students and they're expressing their desires to go to medical school and what major should they take, and they start talking about, well, if I do this major, if I don't get into medical school, I can do this career. And I said, stop thinking like that. If you want to go to med school, you're going to med school because you want to be a physician. If you want to be a physician, then there's no other. Being a physician is not a job. It's not a job. It's a career. It's a calling, as the admissions committee said earlier. So I needed to figure out what went wrong. And being in the aviation industry that I'm in as a flight surgeon, we talk about course correction a lot. When you're flying, who here flew here? Who flew here? There we go. So a lot of people flew here. Did anybody turn around and go back to the airport where they came from because you were off course? No. It doesn't happen. The pilot doesn't come on and say, sorry folks, we're about 10 degrees off course. We need to turn around and head back because I don't know how to get back on course. It doesn't happen. You need to figure out what went wrong, where you are, and get back on course. And this is a great video showing it. Time-lapse of these airplanes coming into land, moving up, moving down, moving left, moving right. They're never perfectly on course. They're always correcting course. Life happens. External factors push you left, push you right, knock you down. But you correct course and get to where you need to go. And that light at the end of the tunnel, being a physician, if that's truly what you want to do, there is no plan B. So, for me, I had to figure out what went wrong. And I could blame my pre-med advisor. I could blame 9/11, because that's when I applied. It's the first year of the electronic AMCAS application, which was a train wreck. That was the time when all the mail stopped because of anthrax after 9/11, so they had to mail out all the applications instead of using the electronic application that took forever to fill out. I could blame all of that.
I'm sorry. My stepson applied that year. He had to refill out his AMCAS twice. It still died. The schools went to paper applications 2 months after the fact.
Yep. Yeah. So I have a good reason, but my MCAT score, which is another good reason, whatever, 27 for those wondering. Outstanding. So I figured out what I was missing. I was missing that clinical volunteer experience. I was missing that shadowing, that experience of knowing why I wanted to be a doctor, to be able to explain to an admissions committee, this is truly why I'm going towards the path I'm going down. Not because I wanted to cut people, because that's not very cool. It's kind of scary when you think about it and say it out loud. So I was missing that experience of being in a hospital, following a physician around. I volunteered what I thought was volunteering. I went to the hospital, Shands Hospital right there at University of Florida, which is a great teaching hospital. And I walked into the volunteer office. I said, I want to volunteer. And they put me in a bright orange shirt, because Florida is orange and blue, bright orange shirt, and stuck me at the information desk and told me how to look up patient rooms and point people to the elevators. That was my volunteering in the hospital. I barely got any kind of patient interaction. I wasn't close enough to smell the patient as they used earlier. So I got that experience I needed, and I ended up reapplying and getting into medical school. And the non-traditional route kind of took place in between when I figured out I didn't get in and when I got in. I went from Florida to Colorado, where my parents had moved, and started working as a home remodeler. How to get into home remodeling? I figured carpentry, orthopedic surgery, same thing, right? The admissions committees will love it. They'll see that I just love working with my hands and love building things, and I didn't have the advising that I needed. And but look at me now. But one of the things I was missing was the shadowing that I said earlier, and I didn't know who to call or how to do it. The same situation you guys are in. How do you call a doctor's office and say, I'm a 20-something-year-old, 30-something-year-old, 40-something-year-old, 50-something-year-old, and I want to come shadow you and hang around your patients? Luckily, I was living with my mom at the time, living back home, which was awesome. And she had a doctor's appointment, and she came home and gave me the business card of the practice manager and said, here, they're expecting your phone call. So I got into an orthopedic surgeon's office, shadowed a couple times a week in the office, observed in the operating room a couple times a week, and had a blast. And that I consider the reason I got into medical school. I got the experience that I needed. I was able to talk intellectually about being a doctor and the experiences of treating patients and seeing patients. But I also think the relationship that I built with that orthopedic surgeon and the letter of recommendation that he was able to write me got me into medical school. So I got in. I got my acceptance letter. My mom called me from Colorado. I was living in Boston now. And she called, and she's crying, and I said, oh, who died? And she read the letter to me, and I called New York Med. I said, okay, I accept your exception, but I want to defer a year. I loved not being in school. So I got into med school. Everything I wanted to do, yet I didn't want to go to med school. At the time, I was working as a fitness manager at a gym, managing personal trainers. And I knew that experience of managing people, working in a corporation, was experience that I wasn't going to get as a medical student, an experience that I would be able to use later in life. And they understood that and accepted it. And so I matriculated in 2009 and realized that med school is expensive. And so as soon as I got my acceptance letter and realized how expensive it was, I made some phone calls. But they were the first phone calls that I made. Back when I initially applied in 2001, I went to an Air Force recruiter's office, and I started the discussion of getting into the military, having the military pay for my medical education. Because growing up, my family wasn't great with money, so I kind of saw struggles with money and the kind of stress that brought in the family. I didn't want that. And so I got my acceptance letter and went back to the Air Force recruiter and realized that it was a pretty good gig. I sign up 4 years of my life, get any residency I want, They just pay for everything, and I do 4 years, never deploy. Right? That's what the recruiter says.
We don't recruit when he's lying, don't we?
And so I signed the dotted line, commissioned in the Air Force, and they paid for medical school. And at the time, I signed up for money. That's the only reason I went. I don't have any family that's in the military other than my grandfather, but he was kind of required to serve back in the day. So I didn't have many ties to being in the military. I just knew that medical school was free. And more than free, I get paid to go to school too. So it wasn't until my officer training where we learned how to put on a uniform and salute, and we started learning a little bit of the history of the Air Force and learning a little bit more about the types of patients that I was going to see and building relationships with other members, other officers that I was going to be serving with in the future. And the teamwork that came with that, that's when I first started to realize that there's something more to this. There's something more than just the money. And that kind of opened my eyes up, and I'm glad it did. And I'll tell you in a minute where I am now, but I don't want to skip med school. So med school, when you take the HPSP scholarship, which I ended up taking, obviously, the Air Force pays you and they forget about you, except for a summer here or there. But med school comes and it just knocks you on your behind. And I was that person that Dr. Prescott was talking about earlier, never really got knocked down. Undergrad was okay for me. It wasn't that hard besides the MCAT. It was taking 3 years off between undergrad and medical school. And obviously for many of you out there, it's going to be a lot longer than 3 years. You have to be ready. When that faucet opens up, you have to be ready. And realize that you're going to have to correct course many times in medical school. You're going to get knocked down. You're going to get pushed left, pushed right. But you're going to have peers, hopefully, faculty, hopefully, that are going to help correct your course. And I finished med school, applied for residency, didn't get the residency I wanted. Shocker. I ended up just doing my year internship and then doing what they call a GMO tour, General Medical Officer tour, as a flight surgeon. And this is where I work now. This is me in the back of an F-16 flying over Arizona. And I posted this on Facebook, and so some of my more conservative friends said, "This is what I'm paying for with my tax dollars?" But what I do day in and day out, I love. There are many of my friends that sat in the same flight surgeon course that I went to that were disgruntled. They didn't get to do the emergency medicine rotation that they want, or residency that they wanted to do. They didn't get to do the dermatology residency they wanted to do. Whatever they wanted to do, they didn't get to do it. The Air Force did it to them. And I sat there and said, I did this to myself. I got terrible step 1 score and didn't do as well in my clinical rotations as I wanted to because I was naive and thought, I'm awesome. I'm a people person, clinical rotations, everybody's going to love me. Oh, but there's still a paper written test at the end that determines most of your grade. So I kept my eyes open. I kept correcting my course. I kept looking at the bright side of things. And I ended up, 2 weeks in, I think, I called my wife. I said, what happens if I really like this flight surgery thing? And she said, we'll figure it out. And I love my job. And let me tell you about my job. I take care of, what I do, I don't practice surgery on a plane. Okay? I know I'm a flight surgeon, but that's not what I do. So get that out of your head. I would love to, but that's not what I do. I'm basically a family practice doc without a board certification practicing in a clinic with a certain subset of patients. And it's the best subset of patients the Air Force can have. It's the pilots, navigators, We take care of jumpers, so parachute guys. We take care of air traffic controllers. Anybody that's directly involved with flying has these cool special duties that require higher level of medical, not care, but they have more restrictions. That's who I take care of. And the best part about my patient population is they avoid me like the plague. Because at any minute, I can take away their wings. And they don't want that. They fly. They love flying just as much as we love medicine. And if we took that away from them, they'd be devastated. So when I have an appointment for somebody, I know that there's something wrong. I know they're sick. And they know that they can't fly. And it's a great population. They're sick. They want to get back to work. It's not the typical patient population of... Never mind. I won't complain about the typical patient population. But it's awesome. And so every day I get to take care of these awesome people. And every day I get to be a physician. And there's 3 great things that physicians have. And we actually saw some of these earlier in another presentation. Integrity. The foresight, the knowledge to do the right thing, even if nobody else is looking. Service. See, this is a service industry. I already said it once. It's not a job. It's a calling. You are serving other people. And excellence. And I hope everybody here wants to be an excellent physician. Nobody wants to be a mediocre physician. Everybody here wants to do the best in pre-med, wants to do the best in medical school, and be the best doctor they can, not only for their own integrity, but also for their patients. And in the end, it's all about the patients. And these 3 things just happen to be the core values of the Air Force, which tie in very well with what I do every day, not only as a physician in the Air Force, but also as an Air Force officer. And people ask me, what do I call you? Do I call you captain? Do I call you doctor? I consider myself an Air Force officer first, a physician second. And that's just kind of, you transform after a while into that mindset. And it's an awesome mindset to have. So I encourage you all to figure out what your path's going to be. And realize that path isn't going to be a straight line. It's going to be lots of squigglies and curlies, and as long as the destination is the same, graduating med school, getting called doctor, you'll be okay. Keep correcting course. Keep figuring out where you made a mistake, why you fell down, how to get back up, and how to get to where you want to be, and you'll be okay. I have some resources at this website for you guys that I put together. A lot of interviews with OldPreMeds like Kate and some other resources I hope you find useful. Good luck to you guys. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.